Welcome to Space Store's 18th edition of our Insights Live. Can't believe we've reached 18 already, and today for the first time we're actually live streaming to Facebook Live as well. So if you joined via Zoom, welcome, and if you joined via Facebook Live, welcome. So the title of today's discussion is around the COVID crisis, and is that an opportunity to accelerate and to press ahead, or is it an excuse to slow down? And a couple of things just before we jump into the conversation. First of all, very excited to be joined by our panelists today. We're going to run through and introduce them. We'd like to thank them very much for joining. Got some stellar panelists joining from different locations globally and with some fantastic range of insights as well. We'd love to encourage you to use the Q&A box. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you've got the Q&A or the chat box. Feel free to jump in with any questions, anything you feel that we should include in the conversation, and anything that you'd like to put to the panel. So first of all, my name's Alex Harvey. I'm VP of Sales with Space Store, and really excited to be co-moderating this discussion with Russell. Russell, do you want to give yourself a brief intro, and then we'll run through the panelists and get an intro from each of those as well?
Sure, thanks Alex, and likewise, very enthused to be on today and to be joined by our panelists. My name is Russell Kingston, and I'm the Managing Director of the Space Store US side of the business. So based here in London, and when I can, I spend a lot of my time in America, so it's been an interesting year. But very excited to hear the insights that our panelists have got for us today.
Great, good, thanks Russell. And excited to introduce the panel to you. So we'll start off with you, Tamar. So Tamar's the Senior Director for Global Real Estate and Workplace with Twilio. Could you give us a brief intro to yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure. I'm looking forward to our spirited discussion. So I have been at Twilio for about 2 years, prior to which I spent 4 years at Zendesk, and then a couple of years at Airbnb in pretty much the same position. I love workplace, love what I do, and these panels are really a great opportunity to not only share the things that we're working on, but to hear from others and what they're working on. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Tamar. Excited to have you with us, and definitely I think we're all here to listen and learn as well as to share the insights we have. Adam, could you give yourself a brief intro? So Adam's principal with Perkins and Will in London.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Hi, guys. So I work with Perkins and Will here in London. I'm in the corporate interiors team, and we're delivering projects across Europe for major organisations, really global organisations, from financial services through legal and tech firms, working on building repositioning projects, workplace strategy, and workplace projects as well. So lots of kind of diverse clients, diverse geography that we're working in. And you know, it's been an interesting year in terms of what we do as an industry, I think.
Cool, good, thanks Adam, thanks for coming on board. And then finally we have Tahera with us as well. So Tahera is the Global Head of Workplace with 91. Can you give us a brief introduction to yourself, Tahera?
Sure, happy to, and hi everybody, and thank you for affording us an hour of your time. We're all very busy people, so I hope it's a good use. So I'm Global Head of Workplace for 91. We were previously called Investec Asset Management, so that might be a name that's more familiar to you. I've been with the company 5 years. My role, in very simple terms, is to make every experience that our people have with our places good ones and memorable ones for the right reasons. Been very fortunate with my global role, so I've been doing projects. I've actually had a very busy year, and despite the pandemic, delivered 5 projects this year in London, New York, Hong Kong, and then 2 in South Africa as well. So it's been quite a busy year. But yeah, definitely looking forward to joining this stellar panel and having the spirited conversation that Tamar mentioned.
Cool, good, thanks Tahera. Well, I guess we jump right in. I suppose what might be helpful is to give a little bit of context to the question, maybe just to kind of get everyone in the frame that the question was asked, and then we can kind of kick that round, get the views of the panelists, and also we're looking forward to hearing the questions coming from the audience as well. So it's obvious to say, but I think it's worth just reflecting back. So obviously in the early part of this year, the global pandemic hit us it's impacted globally across every nation, every country. We recognise that the impact on businesses has been immediate and very significant. In particular, with some sectors, it's been devastating. Some businesses even experienced terminal blow through loss of trade. So we understand that, and I guess many on this call will have been impacted in one way or another through COVID. But the reason behind the question, and kind of bringing it closer to the workplace sector, is that some businesses, and even some of the businesses that we've seen who appear to be thriving, if you look at their public results, have kind of hunkered down. They've stopped capital spend, they've stopped development, they've stopped investing in workplace, while others seem to have disproportionately accelerated their workplace transformation and are developing new projects faster than ever. So I guess the question isn't black and white. It's a very complex question, and there are many factors around the business and its performance, the working from home preferences that people have, the type of business, maybe local or national government restrictions. But kind of zooming out and taking a macro view, Adam, I'd be interested in your thoughts, but what would you say you're seeing from your organisation and also from the clients you're working with? Are people seeing this as an opportunity to kind of scale up and accelerate, or an excuse to kind of batten down the hatches and to hibernate?
I think every kind of organisation and every sector is different, and I think it is quite sectorised. We're seeing most of the movement on leasing activity in London being around tech firms over the last six months or so, which has been pretty consistent in London and in major European countries like Amsterdam and Dublin and Paris. They've been leading the way with large lease events in the last kind of 3 or 4 years anyway, but that movement has continued this year actually, with still some good sized deals happening. So it's very sector based, it's very organizational based, but I think the way that I would sort of sum it up, I guess, I mean, it's a complex subject, right? And terrible things have happened this year, and I think everyone, we're just talking about desks kind of to a certain extent in the end, and there's bigger things to worry about. But I think most organizations that we talk to have taken it as a view to reset. I don't think it's about kind of like slowing down or speeding up. It's about resetting kind of everything that organizations do in terms of, how they communicate to their staff, how they use real estate, how they make and spend money as organizations. So I think in that way, there's been this beneficial ability of people to pause and take some time and really consider what's important to them from a real estate perspective, what's important to them from a HR perspective, what's important to them from a cultural perspective. And I think that that's going to have really positive ramifications. The fit out industry that many of us work in is one of the quickest elements of the construction industry globally. We work on projects that happen really quickly compared to other aspects of construction, and sometimes maybe too quickly. So I think there's been a great ability this year for people to reset their thoughts on what they want to deliver as a workplace for their employees.
That's great. I like that. So almost an opportunity to just pause and consider, be a bit more thoughtful and a bit more intentional maybe about some of the steps we're taking. Tamar, what are your views? What have you seen within Twilio and within organizations you've been involved with?
Yeah, so Twilio is in the tech space, so very much what Adam said rings true. We've also been in the position as one of the companies that is doing phenomenally well over this year. We have had a major acquisition that was recently announced. We've done, great against the revenue projections and beat them in just about every single quarter. But we have had a combination of pause, reflect, and build. So we have certainly in certain locations around the world taken advantage of the fact that we are not in our offices and temporarily closed those locations while waiting to get out on the other side. But we have continued to plan for the future and have currently 4 projects that are underway of varying sizes that we continue to advance. So we haven't slowed down on any of those projects. But then on the reflection piece, one thing is that we certainly believe that there hasn't been enough data points to substantiate any one decision in any particular direction as we move through COVID, but then look towards a time when we can advance past it. And so what we're doing is something that we have termed open work. And it's an initiative that's really going to look at what's going to be the change in our business and the change in that business, how it reflects in the changing workplace. So, questions about, will we have more square footage, less square footage? Is it more desks? Is it conference rooms? We don't know. Nobody knows. We also don't know what the longevity behind those decisions are going to be. So we are in that reflection mode, also in experimentation. So one of the things that we're really going to be doing over the course of the next 18 months is testing out various collaborative settings and actually pulling data from that experience and moving employees through these spaces that we're going to create. They're called dynamic space labs, to figure out what our long-term answers are going to be towards solutions within the workplace.
Great, some great points there, and I think we'll come back to some of those. I like the idea of the kind of experimentation and just trying a few things. What have you seen, Tahera? What's happening at 91? I know you've had a big project just gone live, or is it not yet gone live?
Yep, no, gone live, and I've come into the office, so I'm actually sitting in the new project that was delivered slightly later than planned because of the pandemic, but we got there in the end. So I guess, going back to the question about accelerate or hibernate, I think for me it was where we were in the process. So I guess it's for organizations where you are in your process. We were so far down the line in terms of the piece we'd gone to with this project. So it was a head office relocation in London. Our workplace strategy had been defined pre-COVID, and it was being built and the construction was nearly done. So actually for us, we just had to kind of carry on as we'd planned to pre-COVID. And so for us, that was our transformation anyway. So we've not had, because of the timings for us, we've not done anything more significant, purely because of where we were with this project, and this being our biggest location. What I will say, though, I guess, is that our point of reflection and pause and taking stock will be, in the absence of data points, making sure anything we do isn't emotional, because everything's been quite emotional. So allowing ourselves time to get some data points so that when we do our next bigger project, and we've been doing, I mentioned kind of Hong Kong and New York earlier, which were small projects but smaller. Our next big one will be Cape Town, which is probably the same size as London. And I guess all the learnings from doing London pre-COVID and then during COVID and post-COVID, all those learnings will then probably feed into the next big project. So that's where we are. So for me, it's just where an organization is going to be in their journey, and whether they, and actually whether a decision is already made for them on whether to accelerate, hibernate, or just carry on because you're just on the journey anyway.
Cool. And out of interest, do you think you would have done anything differently if you kicked the project off a year later?
Gosh, that's a really good question. Would we have signed such a long lease tenure? Who knows? But would we? We're quite generous in our space. So actually, I think we would have done some things differently. But I don't actually at the moment genuinely feel that we would have done many things differently, because at this point we would have been doing lots of post-occupancy evaluation, and we just don't have that. It's the data point that Tamar mentioned. We just don't have that, So I feel we've got to give this place a chance, because so much energy and enthusiasm has gone into this because it was such a big deal for us. That I feel almost like I'd be doing a disservice to say, yeah, we'd have changed things, because we haven't even given this one a chance yet. Yeah.
Cool. I'd be interested, and maybe this is something I'd be glad of everyone's thoughts on this. Experiments. I loved your suggestion there, Tamar. What are the experiments you've been playing with? Is there anything kind of specific you've been looking at in terms of a different outcome or a different way of getting to the same outcome?
Yeah, I will say that one of our projects currently in Sao Paulo is probably the biggest departure from how we have been designing offices to date. And we're taking a chance on a relatively small footprint because it's not affecting a ton of employees. But the difference there is that for 50 employees, which is what that particular location is currently set to grow to, we're only providing 24 seats. So we're providing 24 desks, and then we have an entire floor of what we're calling work points, where people will have a chance to work wherever it is that they want to, but it's completely unassigned. And so what we're testing out here is a couple of things. One, that we can get almost a 2-to-1 ratio of people to seat in a new sort of work area. And the second thing is a little bit of a test of cultural norms, because, you know, we could certainly do this within North America and it would probably be received pretty well, but we're testing it out in a country where we haven't done a ton of business. It's a relatively new acquisition for us, to see from a cultural standpoint how something like this could impact the way that they work, whether it is, you know, more positively, if it's neutral or negative. And we've gotten buy-in on the ground for them to test it out. But what we're also doing as we look to design new sites is a complete reduction in the number of heads down spaces that we provide. And I think a lot of people have been thinking at this, particularly in tech, because the idea that there would be some sort of hybrid between remote and in the office is definitely out there and in the, you know, in the daily discussions. So we plan to reduce it as much as 30%. And so we're currently designing to that percentage reduction. And then what we're building in is a lot more open air collaboration spaces, with the idea that prior to this, collaboration essentially happened in conference rooms. And it's not exactly the best place to collaborate. It's also the fact that it has to be incredibly intentional, and it doesn't allow for people to just say, okay, we've all been talking about this on Slack. Why don't the 6 of us just go and grab a space and we can whiteboard it, we can hang out, et cetera. The things that we're looking is at what technology can support that, what in the way that we design those types of spaces can be effective without impacting people around them, right? And then how much of it do we need to provide? So what we're doing in these dynamic workspace labs is building in these test collaboration spaces and then taking a group of employees and piloting it with them over a certain period of time. And during that time, we will measure the time that they are spending there. And this is all going to be, again, through technology, sensors, et cetera. Measuring the time, asking them, you know, what is it that they're using it for? Where was it that they found themselves most effective, least effective, et cetera? And the idea is that if we do that enough, they will have enough information and data points then to substantiate a longer term decision regarding real estate.
Very interesting. So would you say this whole situation has led you to push the boundaries of what you might have done otherwise on experimentation?
For sure, because I think that people's minds are more open, because that's what uncertainty, once you learn to live with it, will do for you, right? Because you have no idea what's going to happen. And what I've seen at Twilio is that we don't have all the answers. And so then let's play around with what the answers can be, since we don't know what they are.
Yeah, that's good. So you're testing out some of the theories. And it's a very pertinent point there about the fact that the whole change and disruption has opened people's minds. There's things that we perhaps thought we weren't ready for in the workplace or couldn't be done, have been done. So it's a great platform to drive a lot more change faster. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so, actually. And when we talk about the change of disruption, you know, there was a point that Amanda made about nobody would have chosen COVID, right? And actually, my view on that was actually, if we all had an opportunity, if we were all asked, would we like an event that will help galvanize change, with us all being change agents, I'm sure all of us would have said yes. We just wouldn't have chosen it to be a pandemic, but the fact that we have been given this opportunity to kind of really take this and make some positive changes, you know, we've absolutely got to leap at this chance and not be looking the same in X time.
What are you seeing, Adam? Are you seeing a similar kind of openness or enthusiasm for trying something a bit outside of the box, a bit more experimental?
Yeah, I think that I think pilots are really valuable, you know, and what Tamar was talking about, you know, if we want to change, you know, you need to be able to experiment in a beta fashion in a kind of relatively safe place, because, you know, real estate is expensive and you could make some expensive wrong decision. So I think definitely trying things out, piloting is a way of pushing forward quickly in a relatively safe way. And most of our clients who are doing considerable projects want to do pilots as part of that, whether it's kind of quite simplistic furniture pilots or whether it's more innovative pilots on construction elements of projects. We're working with a client at the moment developing a new approach to how to deliver their space, and we've done a whole pilot floor for them of new construction techniques. And you need to do that in order to push things forward. And I think there has been maybe time for stuff like that to happen. There's been time, I think, for innovation this year. Certainly our own organisation, unfortunately we haven't been as busy as we would have liked to have been, and we've got lots of really creative minds that want to do good things. And so I think most organisations have been able to put that creative capital into new things this year, and we're going to see some massive benefits of that in the years to come. There's obviously huge issues to come from the the recession and financial implications of COVID, but there's going to be some fast track of innovation that's kind of going to come out of it, just because people have had a bit more time to think about things that aren't their kind of maybe process driven day jobs. So I think it would be a real, to Tahera's point, it would be a kind of a bit of a missed opportunity if we were to look back on this year and haven't seen that innovation happening in our own organizations. Ours is a design organization, but we know that our clients' organizations are also doing that as well. So that innovation, those piloting, that has been a positive outcome of this year, certainly. And I think we'll see more of it because organizations are going to fundamentally change how they use space now, and in order to make that jump, they're going to want to try it out a little bit, and pilots and things are good for innovation, but they're also good to support change management. Mm-hmm. And if you can prove that things work on a smaller scale, and you can collect the data on that, and you can harness the excitement around that, it means that when the full rollout happens, the proof of concept is there, and it's going to be a much more positive thing. So that's going to happen. I mean, I saw a report in the paper this week that said something like 70% of London city organisations are going to revert back to their previous ways of working post-COVID, which I think is crap, to be honest. Every single organisation that we talk to is going to make some pretty fundamental changes. I don't know where that number's come from, but I don't believe that organisations are going to be able to go back from this and survive. I think employers are just not going to accept reverting back to old ways of doing things after this year. So I think organisations that feel that they don't have to progress now are going to struggle to keep the best people and to attract people in the future.
Just to throw a question your way there, Adam. One of the questions that's come in from Vincent Poon is asking, how do you actually get that data? What processes and technology are being used to get the data from pilots and tests pre-COVID and during COVID now? Is there any difference to how you're doing that? Has it affected how you collect the data?
Well, yeah. So there's no people in space at the moment, right? So it's a challenge. So we're currently working on a concept for some sensor information and sensor data, and that's hard when places aren't utilized so much. So trying out furniture, investing in new ways of doing things, and investigating that with clients is hard when there's not so many people around. So you have to work harder in that respect, and you have to be much more careful with the data. That's going to change next year. People will be coming back to the office in more numbers, hopefully sooner rather than later next year. And so when we collect data on skunk work projects or beta projects or pilot projects, we're doing it through kind of qualitative information and quantitative information. So it's great to have a chat to people about the impact of things. It's also great to see the data on how spaces are used. We can use sensors for that. We use QR codes to drive people to fill out surveys directly in relation to their experiences. There's a bunch of different things that you can do, but fundamentally you need to talk to people, because the reason that we're doing these things and these projects and these experiments is to make people's working experience stronger and better. And so if you don't actually talk to people and you just rely on kind of surveys and forms and data, you're not really going to get the good stuff, I don't think. So I think it's a mix of qualitative and quantitative, but you need to talk to people.
That's interesting, and it links actually with a question that Stephanie has just asked, is around this whole pilot thing. How do you get people to participate? So I think you've answered part of that. I'm interested to know, Tamar, how you've done it, how you've got people participating and work that out in this difficult time.
Yeah, well, we are not in our offices, so we haven't done it yet. But rest assured, when we open, we're going to make them be a part of these settings so that they can help inform our future decisions. But what we're looking at is certainly by volunteer group, particularly for groups that a huge part of the way that they produce is via collaboration. So we already have a pretty good idea of what groups those are, and we'll be tapping them to say, hey, this is the outcome we're looking to generate. We think you're perfect to land as a part of this pilot program, and can we get you to commit to the time frame we're looking at right now, I think is about 4 to 6 weeks in using these collaboration settings. But to what Adam was saying, that we will continue to have conversations with them once we actually put them into play. That will substantiate any of the data that we get from the technology that we're looking to install. And right now we're in the process of evaluating various technology solutions that we're going to deploy. So we haven't made a selection yet, but that is likely to happen by the end of the year. But the idea regarding the safety piece of it is that for folks that return to our offices, if we have the pilot in their location, they would still have to be responsive to the requirements that we have for safety. So let's say we build one of these collaborative settings and it's for 10 people. That means maybe half of the people could actually be in that location, which is fine. We still want to know if 5 people were going to use this area, is it just as effective as the design for 10? So there's still information that we can glean from it, even if there's reduced capacity in some of these areas.
Great, thanks, Tamar. And Tahera, I guess your building's fully censored out, is it? If you've just implemented it, what's your viewpoint around data?
No, not at all. So having sensors in our organisation would be countercultural to who we are. So and actually that was a question I was going to ask Tamar actually about tech solutions, because for us that would very much feel like, so for my organisation, perhaps I personally may have a different view, but for my organisation that would just not be appropriate. So I guess in the absence of tech solutions, you know, we just wouldn't do that. So ours would be the talking to our staff and only doing it in that method to get the data through conversation and usage. And actually, and one of the points that Tamar you made earlier as well is about those serendipitous conversations, you know, which is what I do, you know, of you know, hey, do you like this space? You know, how's this working? Do you like the furniture? That's kind of coming with a few people that have been coming into the office anyway, and that's how I've been kind of gathering the data and the feedback with the very few people that are coming in. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm reminded of this show that was on here in the US called House. And he was a doctor, as a diagnostician. And one of the things that he said is that patients always lie. And so you have to utilize testing, et cetera, to get through the lies that they're telling you, because usually they're doing it so that they can look better as a patient. And not that employees lie by any stretch of the imagination. However,
they do.
You know, sometimes they stretch depending on what they believe you're trying to get out of the questions that you ask them. Yeah. And certainly being on site and how often they use the office, we have seen this. So, you know, in one of our locations, or several of the locations, people believe that they are in the office way longer than they think they are. And when we look at badge swipes, our average utilization is under 50% at most locations. Under 50%. And so if we ask people, you know, that might be 90%. And then we're designing for a lot larger population than is effectively utilizing the space. And so that's the reason why we saw fit to couple the conversations, which is what Tahera was talking about, which is absolutely valuable, with some form of technology, just so that we have it from multiple places.
I'm sold, actually, and I agree, and that's why I said, actually, it's, you know, this I have a different view personally, but to represent my organisation, and so what we decided to do is actually, so our max utilisation when we went into this project was 63%, and that was at max, you know, and so, but what we decided to do with our space was actually still give everybody a desk. So where you were saying you're only putting 24 desks for 50 people, that's interesting. We still give everybody a desk, and then we still created amazing alternative activity-based work settings. So our staff at the moment are very fortunate in our London office that they've got an array of choices. So at the moment, I feel Adam actually helped work on the project. So I don't know if he's got this data to hand, but I think for every employee, they've probably got 20 work settings to choose from, or work points. Right. Maybe it's probably not that much, but they've got a good choice.
Yeah, I think the you know, like a number that was always quoted was like 1-to-1. Like if you've got a kind of collaborative and alternative setting for one for every standard workstation, yeah, that's a kind of good ratio to have. Obviously different for every organization. Some organizations need more than that, some need way less, but you know, like it's an old adage, but it's just about choice, right? It's about giving people choice to work in different ways. And now everyone should have the choice to work at home as well. It's just you know, that choice has been there for many people actually, for you know, as long as kind of like laptops and home internet existed. But now that choice should be there for everyone. There's no one who can't work at home, probably, who hasn't done, certainly for the last 6 or 7 months. So that choice of like different ways of working in the office is now extended to the choice of working from home for a proportion of your time. And every organization has to be able to deliver that for their staff, whether it's 1 day a week, 4 days a week. That's up to the department, that's up to the organization, that's up to the person. But that choice has to be there for people now.
Yeah, which is coined as that, I think, you know, where we've been talking about, you know, work from office, work from home, all these acronyms that we've been, abbreviations that we've been getting. And then there's one I saw yesterday, which was the WFA, which was work from anywhere. Because actually, that's ultimately what we were trying to get to, wasn't it?
One of our panelists told us about WFP, which is work from phone. That is work.
I've not heard that one actually, Alex. Okay.
Just out of interest, Adam, what you're saying, the kind of 1-to-1 rule of thumb, have you seen that shift? Are you having different conversations for new spaces you're working on versus, you know, what you would have called a rule of thumb 12 months ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, it's going to be 1/2 soon. You know, there'll be more collaborative and alternative settings and traditional. You know, I wouldn't want to be selling desks right now, right? That's not a market I want to be in. I know you guys sell other sorts of stuff, but you know, if I just sold desks, I'd want to be thinking about what else I could do, because you know, we're not going to have as many desks, but desks are also really important. So you know, I think a lot of people, when they talk about working in the office, they're talking about just coming in to collaborate, but actually there's lots of people who will come into an office to really focus, because home is a pretty vibrant, active and collaborative environment for lots of people, or it's a really uncomfortable and unergonomic environment. And so there will be lots of people that are going to come into the office and just get their heads down and really do some work. So, you know, like, although I flippantly say I wouldn't be in a desk market, there is still a need for a desk, you know, or somewhere where you can just do some work. And that will be in the office as much as at home for some people. So those ratios are definitely changing. You know, they've been changing for a long time. And like I said at the beginning, you know, it's really dependent on how an organization works. You know, people trying to make sweeping statements that apply to whole cities or whole industries is not appropriate when you think about how different organizations are and how different they need to work.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think there's a question coming, which I think was related to something Tamar was saying, but I think also relates to what you're saying there, Adam, around the project you described earlier, Tamar, where you'd reduced the desks to 24. How did you arrive at that number? And it looks like this is coming from the standpoint of a designer or somebody who's designing spaces, who's saying, I try to advise the client and challenge the numbers, but there's still a kind of resistance to reducing desks even after the COVID.
Yeah, I certainly credit my head of design and construction for spearheading the conversations with the client directly to get them to understand why it is that we wanted to sort of test this with their site. And there were a few things that we utilized. Number one, we simply created a fantastic looking space on the floor that has no desks, right? It's a complete departure from the floor that is mostly desks. And I think in being able to help them visualize what that experience could be at that other floor, even though it's different, it was something that they could be excited about. And then I think that the second thing that we did was essentially say, look, we're trying this out. But it doesn't preclude us from adding desks later if it doesn't work out. If this experiment doesn't go the way that we think it is, we're still going to be building in the infrastructure that if we do need to put in desks down the line because we absolutely need it, or you come back and tell us that it's not working, that we can do that. So either way, what we've explained to the client is that there's an out. In that this is a solution that we want them to participate in, at least initially, to give it a try. And again, I think from a tech perspective, we often have more openness to various types of working models. And then we're just now taking the opportunity to pounce on that.
I love that, because you effectively, what you're saying, we're taking the fear away from the experimentation.
Right.
If you go down this route, if you come with us, we're not going to penalise you if it doesn't work.
Right.
That's great. It's interesting, a question that's just come in from Andy, saying, how is and will social distancing impact the workplace? I think that's an interesting one as to whether, obviously, clearly it impacts it now, but how big a part is it going to play in the future? Adam, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to play a big part in the future. We are going to move past COVID. We're going to all be back in sweaty nightclubs, going to watch football matches, having parties together. Like the office is a pretty healthy place. Most offices are pretty healthy places. I think that we will be moving past that. But we will of course be designing spaces that are resilient to what's next in the future. And we will be designing spaces that are probably less dense than they have been in the past, because organizations won't need to design such dense spaces because they can rely on not everyone being in the office at the same time, which never happens anyway, by the way, but people design for that. So offices will be less dense, just by kind of like want. People don't really want to be on top of each other anymore, and I think that's pretty fair enough. And they'll be used in different ways. So I think there will just be a difference in density anyway. But I think, designing one-way systems or putting stickers on chairs, that's something which I'm really hopeful will go away pretty soon. I think the challenge that will remain, and it's a challenge that happened, it's happened in the past. It happened in New York post 9/11. Is the challenge around lifts? I think is a big problem. And we are certainly, you know what it's like when you go to a city building in the morning and there's like 12 people kind of face to face in a lift, similar to a tube. People aren't really going to want to do that. I think that's going to be something that is a hangover. And we are hearing more of our clients who are looking for buildings which are maybe of more of a low-rise profile. And so I think that probably will hang around a little bit longer, the social distancing around lifts. But I think when it comes to actual office environments, we need to be past that, as a society generally. So therefore, we have to be past it in an office. And we're not designing any offices now to allow for social distancing, because the offices we're designing now aren't going to open for another year or so. And, there will be a vaccine at that point. There will be an ease in. There will be something else for us to consider as well.
Does that have interest? Sorry, go on, Tahera.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we're not having cellular offices again, Adam?
I think there might be more cellular offices in the future. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, everyone has their own cellular office now. It's their kitchen, it's their bedroom.
Right. Yeah.
Like, like everyone has a private office, which is what happened 30 years ago. It's come back. Yeah. It's in their home rather than their office. So everyone's got a private office now. So if you're in the office, you need one, or if you're in your office and you need focus, maybe you do need one. So I think smaller cellular space for smaller groups of individuals is probably going to make a little bit of a comeback.
Okay. Interesting.
Just got a question coming from Nuno Carrera, who's asking, I think it'd be interesting your views on this, Tamar. An interesting question. She's saying, so companies who are struggling financially due to the current crisis, are they going to be able to adapt to make positive changes? So I guess my question is, does this need to be expensive? Do these changes need to cost a lot of money?
I mean, I don't think so. Because you can choose low-cost solutions if the solution isn't already embedded as a part of the workplace. And I say that because as a part of one of our pilots, like, we have plenty of furniture. All we need to do is move that furniture around. and, you know, look to creating settings that don't necessarily mean that we're acquiring new furniture in order to create it. We're just sort of rearranging things. I also think for companies that are struggling financially, and we have seen this year in some of our peer companies, is that they are making the determination that's like, okay, maybe until we are on stronger footing, we will be more remote first. So they're eliminating probably their number 2 behind people, cost, and that is real estate where they can. And so I think that for those that are struggling financially, that the bright side could be that the change in real estate strategy, if you can match it to the cultural demands of that particular company, can help them continue to save costs. And so therefore they're more viable because they don't have, you know, this large piece that's looming every single month for years and years and years to come.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it kind of relates to what we were saying earlier around maybe this opportunity to be a bit more thoughtful, to step back anyway. So rather than jumping in and make any kind of knee-jerk or you know, overly reactive decisions and financial investments, maybe just give it some thought and then make a move.
I think also, actually, Alex, on that, I think in you know, the word workplace transformation. Transformation is such a grand word, isn't it? But actually, it doesn't need to be a grand act. You know, actually, the smallest act or the cheapest or, you know, free thing can have the biggest transformation. So I think, you know, perhaps, you know, we get into that mistake of transformation equals pounds and massive. It really doesn't. And just to Tamar's point there, in terms of, you know, using existing furniture and moving it around, I would say actually tap up your furniture suppliers and say, I need some free furniture, you know, and let me experiment that way, you know, and that's no cost, but actually gives you an opportunity to try something different. So yeah, so I think it's just being really clear in your head and just getting kind of thinking about what it is you're absolutely trying to do, and then working at the most efficient way for your organization.
There's just an interesting question that's just come in here, saying that if work from anywhere is the disruption for the workplace, do companies and landlords move to a pay-as-you-use rental model for their workplace? I think that's an interesting thought there.
Yeah, maybe I'll start, if that's okay. I mean, that's already happening. I think, you know, the flexible office market is obviously taken a big part of that. You know, I think we, you know, at Perkins, we have a partner organisation called Portland who do a lot of retail innovation work, and you know, that's a sector which has gone through a similar disruption that we're going through. It was disrupted because of e-commerce, not because of a pandemic. But you know, retail's had to change. Many retail landlords are now working on revenue linked leasing structures. So they're actually charging rent based on how much revenue the tenant is able to generate from that retail unit. And so, you know, all these more kind of fluid charging methodologies is definitely going to play out. You know, it's something that is really kind of linked to obviously the sharing economy, subscription-based products as a service, real estate as a service. You know, those things in terms of fluidity of payment structures will, you know, go deeper into real estate than it already has done. And people want flexibility. They want to focus on service rather than just kind of like delivering the same old thing. And I think more importantly, it's going to also reach other aspects of what we do. So as well as having that flexibility around the landlord-tenant relationship, I think having that flexibility with how we actually deliver projects from a fit-out perspective, from a furniture perspective, will also come into play. And products as a service for furniture, for floor finishes, for lighting, not having to own products, not taking responsibility for that asset is something that more and more people are going to want, which is great for the environment. That sharing economy puts a much more onus on people to deliver products in a more circular fashion and take responsibility for an asset. And we're going to need that. If we're going to move towards a net zero economy, we're going to need people to take more responsibility for their assets and to deliver services in a more circular way. So I think that fluidity, probably a long-winded answer to the question, but it applies to real estate. But I think we're going to find it actually much more relevant to all the things that maybe we're doing as more of an interior design industry in the coming years, and we should be ready for that.
That's interesting. Do you think sorry, Tamar, do you think this is an accelerator for sustainability? The situation we've got now will help accelerate the sustainability.
Well, I bloody hope so, because like, if something like this isn't going to accelerate, you know, global heating, then what is? You know, so I think the innovation that I talked about that's happening in organisations this year, the environmental innovation is one of those things. You know, we're seeing more and more pledges made by companies around their carbon neutral pledge. We're seeing more innovation. You know, Candy have just released a washing machine where you don't buy the washing machine, you buy the service, and they take responsibility for the washing machine. Boris Johnson obviously made some good but not good enough commitments yesterday to investment in the economy. At Perkins and Will, we've made a pledge recently in how we're going to pivot to delivering net zero interiors. So I think 2020 is a reset on workplace, but hopefully also a reset on dealing with global heating, global warming, global heating.
That's interesting. Sorry, Tamar.
Oh, yeah, thanks. The one thing that I was going to respond to something that Adam said is that, you know, we've had WeWork and, you know, those types of disrupted real estate models for a number of years, but fundamentally real estate and its very traditional old school model is what has to change in order for there to be more opportunities to be able to use real estate differently. Mm-hmm. So if landlords get out of the idea that people have to, you know, have 5, 10, 15, 25-year leases in order for them to be able to recoup costs on their end and to be able to make a profit, as long as that remains a part of how it is that we look at real estate, then the tide is not going to change as much as we would want it to. So landlords have really got to show up differently. But I also understand that on their end, from development to, you know, putting it out there on the market to, you know, marketing to commercial tenants, that is something that, you know, is entrenched in the way that they do business. However, I think that what we're seeing is that there's now going to be even more of a discrepancy in what it is that they need out of their investments versus the occupiers' needs and how they are just not going to be aligned.
I agree with you, Tamar. And actually, I saw something yesterday from my real estate advisor in terms of it's time for the real estate market to throw out the rule book and start road mapping again. And where we are, you know, I'm kind of occupier in our building, but I'm also a landlord. And actually, one of the things that I've been doing, which is something that we would have done because it was right for us, was actually what services we can offer to our incoming subtenants. Yeah, and that was something that we were looking at. And actually, now we realise that was absolutely the right thing to do. That it's not just a building that they're going to pay rent on for 10 years and happy days. And I can say that though, because I'm not an institutional landlord. It just happens to be we've got surplus space, and so we you know, so we want anybody coming into our building to enjoy the space as much as we're going to. But you realise the importance of that and the impact of that.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think just from my perspective, the shortening of leases is the thing. Yeah, I think the average lease signed in commercial buildings in the US last year was 5 years, which is much shorter than previously. The thing that we need to think about as an industry is if people are going to use space in a shorter, more fluid way, is we really need to think about how the things we put into those spaces can be used again in the future.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the problem with short leases is waste, and, you know, we can't afford that. So we need to work out how we can make sure we can deliver spaces which are fit for purpose and fluid, but have lives which go on and on and on after the first use, because we can't have churn equaling waste, because it's just, you know, we just can't afford that anymore. So that's the kind of counter complication of shorter leases, is delivering spaces that are designed in a circular way that are reversible in the way that they've been designed.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And I see furniture as a service, kind of maybe there's something there. Because, you know, once you have millions of dollars worth of furniture and it's sitting on your company's books, the last thing the company wants to do is get rid of it prematurely and then advance against the, you know, that return too early. So, you know, maybe there's something to be said for a part of the industry forming just in the way that you were just talking about it, not even necessarily from a sustainability, but that would be sort of like one of the outcomes. that if there's some way that, you know, people don't have to purchase furniture and then get rid of it, and that it can be held by someone for, you know, a longer amount of time, and that multiple potential occupiers can use it, even though I'm not sure people would be into it. But for those that are into it, maybe that's a thing. It's not now. But to Tahera saying, you know, like how can they provide services to their subtenant, like it's furniture as a service. I imagine that the subtenant didn't have to purchase their own furniture, and then they're going to either back into it maybe after the subtenant leaves, and then they can continue to use it.
Absolutely.
Great points there. I love the conversation. We're coming to our last 5 or 6 minutes now, so just there's a few more questions coming which I want to try and cram into the last few minutes. But before we do that, I wanted to put out an invite to the audience to join us on our next Insights Live, 10th of December. So you'll see an invite coming out for that in the next few days. So feel free to register and get your own personal invite for that. But there's a question here taking a slightly different tack to what we're on now from Steve Booker, who's asking about the way to design to address effectively video conferencing being I suppose it could become a divisive process where we've got those who have and those who have not. So there are those who are in the office, in the meeting room. There are those who are zooming in, you know, joining via Teams, whatever platform it is. Do we need to change the AV in meeting rooms? Do we need to enhance it? How are we going to make it a more kind of equitable experience? Be interested in your views on that, Adam, from a design standpoint.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably the kind of elephant in the room of when we move back to being in the office. You know, the equity of the experience is not just with AV, it's with everything actually, is making sure that people have a democratic working experience wherever they are. You know, and I think there's going to be a big problem. It's kind of easy when everyone's in the office, and it's easy when everyone's at home. It's not easy when we're between the two. And you know, some companies have found that a little bit over the summer when, you know, they started to return to the office. You know, and I think from an AV perspective, we've all like used to seeing people's faces, right? Whereas when you're in the office, you've got one camera in the corner of the room, and you know, you see a bunch of blobs. So actually, from a digital meeting perspective, everyone having their own camera on their face is actually a little bit better of a kind of personal experience than being in a bigger meeting room. You know, I don't know if that means that you're going to find that people just when they're in meetings, it's something that we've been doing is actually everyone's using their own laptop and using that camera and dialing into the meeting separately with a unified microphone source, so that, you know, people on the other end can actually engage with people in a better way. I think you'll see more of that. You know, pretty much everyone will have a laptop now anyway, so that's quite easy to do. Yeah, I mean, I think that a big challenge that we're finding is, you know, there's going to be a lot of people on calls a lot of the time when they're in the office, just because meetings are always going to have an element of dial in now. You know, many meetings which were kind of like progress meetings are just going to happen on calls now. People aren't going to convene for those sorts of meetings anymore. So there's going to be a lot more calls. So we're going to be in offices where there's just calls going on all the time, the same people in the same meeting, they sit next to each other. You know, it's a kind of acoustical and focused nightmare that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And how we accommodate that amount of digital meetings whilst in the office is going to be a real design challenge, I think, and delivering spaces that allow people to do that in a way that doesn't disturb lots of other people without building loads and loads of small rooms is a big challenge, I think.
What's your views on that, Tamar? Are you seeing video continuing to be an important part of the day-to-day, and how are you kind of designing or thinking of designing your spaces to accommodate?
Yeah, it's a huge part, and I agree with everything that Adam just outlined. One of the things is that we believe it's a combination of practice and technology. So we do have to educate people in the way that our collaboration methodology is changing at Twilio, and what are the things that we need to be able to see to create that equitable experience and essentially get people to do it. Because you can put the technology out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to use it. One of the things that we have looked at recently is a product called Owl, which just so happens to be Twilio's mascot. And I like it for a few reasons. Number one, most meetings are relatively small, so usually sub 6 folks. And in order to create the equitable experience that we're looking for, we wanted to make sure that people, that all those faces on the screen, like that is the great equalizer. But there will be some people who will be in the office and some people will be at home. And one of the things even pre-COVID that was always a thing from my own perspective is that if I'm the only person who is on the video conference and there are, 5 other people in the room, we are having a very different experience. And so this product, Owl, essentially is a 360-degree camera. It looks like an owl as it's sitting on the table. And essentially it senses the folks in the room and puts their faces onto the screen as if they were joining separately. And so you can still have a little bit more kind of like how we are now. So if the 6 of us, 1 of us was not in the room and 5 of us were, it would still look like this grid of faces. And so it helps for the person that is not in the room. And I think that that's really what we're talking about. It's how do we bring the folks that are not necessarily into the room into that shared experience.
How about for you, Tahera? Are you seeing the same challenges?
Absolutely, we are. And actually, the product you're talking about, Tamar, sounds really interesting because I know my guys here have been starting to look at some camera solutions to deal with that. But actually, as Adam said as well, it's that equity of space, not just in meeting rooms, but it's the facilities and environment that we have in the office, and how do we make sure, from a physical well-being, mental well-being, as well as the productivity at work bit, there's all those bits that we need to think about that gives that equity of experience. Don't have the answer. I guess it's a case of once we know what that looks like, what that model will be in terms of how many people in the office, how many people at home, we can then start drilling into that a little bit further in terms of the how quickly we need to do certain things. If everybody comes back, then we're all good, right?
Which I think we've already agreed won't happen because of the hybrid working. So on that note,
yeah,
it's been a great conversation. I think we're just reaching the end of our hour, so the time has definitely flown. So thanks again very much to our speakers, to Tamar, to Adam, and to Tahera. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Tamar, any reflections on the conversation today or anything else?
No, it's been great. I just, I do want to put out there that, think wide and think that, how things are not necessarily how they need to return to being. That things can be different. And I think that we now have a bit of social permission to explore that.
Yeah.
I just add, let's make 2021 as much, let's talk about the environment as much in 2021 as we talked about COVID in 2020. Let's put as much emphasis, as much expertise, as much money into the environment next year as we've done into COVID this year. And then COVID will have had some sort of a good output.
Agree. Well said, Adam. Absolutely. And I would just say that actually, we're all this can feel really overwhelming, and perhaps we're all kind of a bit like, oh gosh, I should be doing something. I need to be doing something. No, just that, where we started about pause and take stock, because it is overwhelming. So actually allow yourself that time when we've all had to experience so many challenges this year to just be. I think that's really important.
Good. Thanks, Tahera. And on that note, I think that brings us to a close. So thank you again to all our attendees.
Thank you very much.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Keep well, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Stay
Keep
safe.
well. Bye.
The world is changing. Technology is changing the way we communicate, the way we work, the way we think. Every market is affected, and in every market, there is a disruptor. Cutting-edge organizations are leading the way and totally transforming the norms in their space.
Essentially, these companies are transforming into tech companies, and the attraction of top talent into the workspace and the provision of environments which nurture and support these key innovators and thinkers are absolutely key to delivering this transformation.
At the heart of this change is the workplace strategist. Part designer, part human capital expert, part FM, part futurist.
This role requires a holistic understanding of the workplace and its inhabitants.
The challenges are exciting, but the stakes are high. Through carefully crafted strategy and large budgets, the goal is to elevate and inspire an enriched workplace experience. The well-being of staff directly affects engagement, happiness, and productivity.
The masterminds who get this right
leave a legacy that directly affects the success of a company for years.
But behind it all, you need a maker. Those ideas need to become practical reality. And it's not just about having all the tools.
It's about how we think, how we listen, and how we share the vision.
Through our advanced skills and capabilities and experience working together, Spacester can become the maker element of your idea, the catalyst for translating your strategy from vision to reality.
Spacester are the creators, the engineers and the design thinkers for the leading workplaces of today. But this is nothing new. Spacester was founded on innovation. It's ingrained in our DNA. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning.
With in-house BIM modeling, additive manufacturing, a dedicated maker lab, and extensive experience working with a broad variety of material types, we can manage the process of evolution through which your concept is tested, reviewed, and refined until it's ready for final launch.
And then, pursuing the journey further, our unique process of mass customization enables us to multiply the concept and scale up to meet the global demands of your strategy.
Working directly with companies like Amazon, Adobe, Instagram, and Autodesk, Spacester have formed a unique partnership to turn brilliant ideas into practical and scalable reality. In fact, we highly prize the role we play as the maker element of each of these companies' journeys into a tech-driven future.